Hello my lovelies and welcome back to Becky's Budget. My name is Becky and on this channel I post all sorts of finance content from debt, savings. We're going to be talking mortgages soon because we're trying to get to that point but not quite yet. So if that seems like something that you're going to be interested in, then keep watching the video, I guess. So today's video is going to be things that I wish that I knew before I started paying off my debt. So if you have watched some of my recent videos, you will know that I recently paid off almost £9,000 of debt within the last year. I do have a video talking about how I did that and all things related to that already, so I won't talk too much about that. But there are a lot of things that I really wasn't prepared for throughout that process, and a lot of things that I wish that I knew before I started. So I'm going to share some of those with you today. Before I do start the video, I do just want to mention I am not a financial advisor in any sense. I am talking about my own experience and things that I've learned from my own research. My master's is literally in consumer psych and business. Like, I have like no formal education in money. I have YouTube and Google. So if you are gonna kind of listen to anything that I say, please do your own research around these things as well. The first thing that I really wasn't prepared for was the emotional toll that it was going to take on me on a day-to-day basis in so many different ways. I think that we expect that with paying off debt there is going to be some kind of emotional difficulty with it, but I found that there were so many kind of more emotions going on than I really expected. I think I kind of expected that the main issue that I would have would be kind of being upset that I couldn't have things that I wanted, and it really actually wasn't the case. The kind of hardest part emotionally for me was actually physically just paying the money, which sounds very strange. So it's so difficult emotionally to work so hard and work long hours. For the last year, I've consistently worked probably at least 50 hours a week, more in the 60 to 70 range for most of the year. So to work so hard, and I don't really make that much money still, so I was working so hard and so long for quite little money really, to then have all of that money hit my bank and I would immediately have to put some aside for tax, keep maybe a little bit to buy some food or pay rent or whatever, and then literally all the rest of it was just poured into debt. So because that money was kind of paying for things that I'd already had and don't even have anymore, like it's not like I was paying, say, a car loan that I was still driving the car every day and being able to enjoy the car every day. I was paying off things that I've used and they're gone. So it really felt a lot like I was just working for nothing and I was just throwing money away, and it was really demotivating to kind of get paid and not be able to keep any of it. And I think that's something that people don't really talk about when they're talking about debt. I think when people are talking about debt, you quite often hear about the relief of having paid debt and the difficulty of budgeting, but I don't really hear about this kind of like bitterness that you get because you're working so hard and it almost feels like, in a way, like it's for nothing. And in addition to that, there were a lot of points where, because I was trying to pay my debt off so quickly, I would often leave myself without enough money for things that I did need, and then in the middle of the week I would run out of money and ended up having to put food on the credit card again. So there were a lot of backslides and it was really demotivating at times. Just please make sure you're budgeting enough for your bills and your food and your daily needs. Give yourself a little bit of a budget for things to treat yourself and enjoy a little bit of your money, because I can guarantee you, even if it takes you an extra month to pay off that debt because you've bought yourself some extra coffees or an extra pair of shoes maybe, it's gonna be worth it for the difference that it has on you mentally. So yeah, I feel like that was actually kind of a bit of a bummer to start the video on, but I do really feel like the demotivation that came with paying so much money on debt and those kind of little backslides here and there were things that I really wasn't prepared for and were really difficult to deal with in the moment, because I think that a lot of people, when they talk about debt, they predominantly talk about budgeting, spending as little as possible, the relief that comes when you pay the debt off, but nobody really talks about that kind of in between real difficult kind of stages where you're paying all your money, you're pouring everything that you can into debt, and sometimes you're maybe being left with very little money or to no money, or you're actually being pushed backwards because you're trying to pay the debt so hard that you're ending up having to borrow more, and it comes that kind of cycle. So yeah, it's hard, but try not to be too disheartened if you go backwards, or if you're feeling like you're working so hard for nothing. You're not working hard for nothing, you're working hard for that feeling of freedom that you're gonna have when you finally make that less payment. And yeah, you're gonna get there, it's gonna be okay. So the next thing that I wish I had known was quite how many other people are in debt. When I first kind of fell into debt, I was so embarrassed, I was so ashamed of myself, and I didn't want to talk about it, I didn't want anybody to know. It was like this big dirty secret that I had. And then all of a sudden, when I did start talking about it and sharing it, I realized that so many of the people that I know have been in debt or are in debt. And when I talked about it online, so many people were responding, talking about their debt, and it just made me realize that it's so much more normal than I realized. And that knowledge not only made me feel so much less alone, but the more I talked about it, the more I learned about it, and the more people would tell me their hints and tips and things that helped them, the more people understood me. So if I was turning down going out a lot, or turning down saying no to expensive activities and things like that, people understood that. They knew that it wasn't just I didn't want to hang out with them, it was that I couldn't afford to do certain things or go certain places. And that meant that it made my relationships around me much easier because people understood. I do think that if I had known earlier quite how common debt was, I would have first of all just felt so much better within myself and less guilty, less ashamed. And I think that if I was less ashamed about it, I would have probably been able to tackle it a little bit earlier and feel a little bit more able to do something about it. So this one is kind of related, but you have to remember that this is also going to be a little bit hard on the people around you, just because they're not the ones paying the debt and they're not the ones kind of working for it or saving for it. You have to remember that if something's very difficult for you, it is going to be very difficult for the people around you to see you in that kind of position. If the people around you might kind of struggle to understand why you're working so hard to pay debt if it's something that doesn't need to be paid yet, or they might struggle to understand why you can't come to certain events and things. They might feel like it's a very personal thing and that you don't want to hang out with them. And I would again just recommend trying to be very open with them, very open with what you want and why you're doing this. If there are people who are still pushing back and still trying to encourage you to constantly spend a lot of money that you don't have, or just really aren't supportive in your journey, then perhaps consider whether there are people that you kind of need in your life and whether there are people that have your best interests in mind. Because if you really want something that badly and it's something that is going to be good for you, and then the people around you aren't supporting that and don't want that to happen, do they really have your best interests in mind? That's completely different to people who are supportive but just struggle to see you struggle. My partner, I think, at many points found it difficult to see me being upset, but was still completely supportive throughout the whole process and throughout the whole thing. This is actually almost a little bit hypocritical after the last one, but the next thing that I really wish somebody had told me earlier is to ignore everybody else. Okay, maybe don't ignore, but don't take what everybody else is saying as gold, and remember that this is your personal situation and you know best what will or will not work for you. So there are so many gurus that I watched online. You know the classics, the Dave Ramsey beans and rice, I think. There's so many opinions and so many people have opinions on what to do. And you know what? Maybe if you followed their advice to the T, maybe you would get out of debt earlier. But you also have to remember your mental health and that you have to live your daily life. You could focus all your time on paying your debt off in the next year, and you could get hit by a bus next week. Literally, you have to enjoy the time that you're here, because you don't know how long you're here for anyway. So you have to kind of find that balance between living a life that feels still enjoyable but still building that kind of better future for yourself. And if you feel like, I don't know, a Starbucks on the way to work once a week or twice a week or whatever is something that you really need or really want in your life, and that really makes you happy and really makes you feel good, then have the coffee, have the Starbucks. If it's, I don't know, going out for cocktails with your friends once a week, once things open up obviously, then do it, and just budget it in. Find a way to maybe take something else out to make enough money for that, or just give yourself a budget. Say if you normally spend £50 on cocktails, say okay, actually moving forward I'm going to spend £30 on cocktails, and bring that down, and maybe I'm going to buy less snacks in the week to account for that in my budget. Or maybe rather than taking an Uber to my friends before we go out, I will take the bus there. Things like that. And you can just find a way to make what you really want to do and how you want to live your life work for you. Strike the balance, and don't listen to what everybody else says, in the sense of you don't have to take it all for gold. You can listen to people's advice, and you can find a way to alter that advice in a way that works for you. This was actually a little bit more something that I wish that I had done. I wish that I had saved a small emergency fund before I started paying off my debt. And I know that this sounds really counterproductive, but I'm not talking about like a 3 to 6 month emergency fund, like not a full emergency fund, just like maybe £500 or £600 that would have covered me if something went wrong and if something big happened. Because the feeling of having to kind of dip back into your credit cards or debt or whatever that type of debt is can be really demotivating. And for me, every time I kind of went backwards a little bit, it felt kind of like soul destroying. It was really tough to deal with. It was really horrible. And I do think that perhaps if I had just saved a little bit of money to the side to begin with, and then really attacked the debt, then kind of emotionally and morale wise, it would have really helped me get through the last year with a little bit less stress and upset. But on the flip side of that, the reason that I didn't do that is that it would have meant that I paid the debt a little bit slower, and that's not what I wanted at the time. In hindsight, I think it would have really helped. But yeah, maybe just something to think about if you're somebody who gets kind of dejected really easily, that maybe that could be something that would help with your motivation and your morale. Then on a similar kind of thread, I do really wish that I had been told / kind of allowed myself to spend a little bit more money on things that I needed to spend money on. So for instance, I think in like the start of winter last year, I bought myself like 2 pairs of boots that inevitably fell apart because I was trying to buy just the very cheapest boots that I could, so that I wasn't wasting any money. But then because they fell apart, I ended up replacing them anyway. So in the end, I ended up buying a pair of Doc Martens that are really sturdy and are pretty much still like new, even though they're like 8 months old now and I wear them all the time. And I wish that I had allowed myself to buy that more expensive pair of boots in the first place. That would have lasted me longer. I think the first 2 pairs were maybe like £20 each. And then the Docs I bought secondhand, which I think were like £80 or £90. So yes, I did spend more on the Docs, but I would have spent £40 less if I hadn't bought the cheaper boots first, and the Docs I know will last for years and years. So in the end, I'm going to get that value for money. Things as well like insurance. I wish that I had had winter on a good insurance plan earlier on, because as you will know if you've watched one of my previous videos, between my partner Philip and I, in the last couple of years, we've easily spent a couple thousand, if not more, on vet bills. And I do really think that if I had taken the time to put him on a better insurance plan earlier. Even though I would have been spending more money on that insurance plan, in the long run it would have saved me money. I guess what I really wish somebody had told me is that it's okay to spend money on things that you need and get the kind of good versions of the things that you need that are gonna perhaps make it a little bit slower to pay off your debt because you're buying a more expensive version, but in the long run they're going to save you money and they're going to, I guess, contribute to an overall better financial future. Okay, so the next thing that I really wish I knew was kind of more of the details about my bank accounts, my credit accounts. For instance, part of my debt was split across 2 credit cards, and at first I kind of thought to myself, okay, so I need to pay the credit card that has the highest interest rate off first because that will save me the most money. But then perhaps a month into paying off my debt, I realized that the other credit card, even though it had a lower interest rate, because it had a bigger balance, it was still gaining more interest each month. So actually I was not really being as smart as I thought I was by paying the credit card that had the higher interest rate because the other one was gaining more interest, so I was still paying more interest than I needed to be. Luckily I still caught it relatively early, but it definitely cost me some money not understanding that properly. Similarly, I really wish that earlier on I had considered a balance transfer card. So this is something that I did quite near to when I was starting to get my kind of life in order and starting to deal with my debt and pay my debt. But it is something that I wish somebody had told me kind of before I started, something I wish I knew about before I started so that I had done it sooner. And then another thing that you do really have to consider though about balance transfer cards is the interest rates on the 2 different cards and whether that's going to be worth it long term for you if you are going to take a lot longer to pay off that credit card still. So if the interest rate on the new card is much higher and it's only interest free for say a month or 2, if you're not going to pay off that credit card in the first month or 2, are you really going to save any money? Depends on the balances and your exact situation, but that is something that's worth considering before you apply for a balance transfer card. So then the last one, and this is kind of sad in a way, so prepare yourselves. I very much expected that when I made that last payment, when I became debt free, and again, I've mentioned this in previous videos, I'm talking about debt free, I still have student loans. I do live in the UK, so the student loan system means that I don't need to pay them unless I earn a certain amount, which I don't. So basically for me at the moment, I wouldn't be saving any money long term if I started paying my student loans. I could talk about that in another video if anybody is interested, because it is kind of a complex topic. So yeah, I am talking about debt free because the student loans in my mind just don't really count, they don't really exist. But just to be clear, I haven't paid my student loans because there's like 55 grand of them. Yeah, anyway, back to the point. I really expected and I really thought that when I made that last payment and I became debt free, it would be like, I don't know, like an angel descended and blessed me and fireworks in the sky or something. I don't know what I expected. I expected it to feel like a really magical moment, but just nothing happened. Nothing changed, nothing felt different. I posted about it on Instagram and people were like congratulating me, and I felt like it was lovely to hear that so many people were excited for me and happy for me, but it also felt like, it still felt like it wasn't me, it wasn't my situation. There was a lot of denial, and I think it's been couple of weeks now and it still doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like that's me, that's my life, and I still get these like pangs of anxiety and feel stressed about having to pay off debt, and then remember, oh yeah, I've done that, like it's over. It's gonna take a while for your brain to kind of get out of that like panicked survival mindset that it's been in for so long when you've been paying debt for so long. I still feel very guilty spending any money at all. I feel like my relationship with money has changed so much, and I feel very just strange about it. I don't know kind of how my relationship with money is going to evolve going forwards, but as of right now, it still feels like a really scary thing. I don't know, it's really hard to describe. If you are expecting this magical moment where you're gonna feel so euphoric and it's gonna be amazing, maybe that'll be the case for you. Maybe it will, and I hope it will. But for me, I still feel very stressed about it. I still feel very anxious, and I'm still waiting for that moment of like happy relief. So one thing that I would kind of recommend though is to have some kind of goal after the debt. And I found that that's really helped me kind of focus my anxiety around money and my nerves. I'm still continuing to budget and to watch what I'm spending. I'm slightly more free with myself and slightly less harsh with myself, but it makes very little difference really, to be honest. But yeah, having that savings goal afterwards has really helping me. So at the moment I am currently trying to save £3,000 for an initial emergency fund, which would be about 6 months of bills and food and things like that if I was very careful with my money within those 6 months. So that will kind of cover me if anything goes wrong with work, I can't work for some reason. That would cover me for a little while and give me quite a while to get things sorted. So focusing on that and being able to save for that is really helping me to focus the anxiety. So yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about today. This video was actually way harder to film than I thought. I think it had me really thinking about some of the hardest points of my debt journey, and it's made me a little bit emotional at times, so I'm kind of glad that the filming is over now. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. If you did like the video, then please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment down below, because I love reading what you guys have to say. And hopefully I will see you all next time. Bye.